Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast has evolved over the 5+ years since it first launched. From now on, I'm going to be talking about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. And also mindset, of course, but mindset of all kinds, not just business mindset. I think. Things are changing for me, as you may have noticed if you've been following me online or listening to this podcast, so anything goes here. I hope you stay along for the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today, and now let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 286. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another co-hosted episode with the fabulous Joe Casey. This is the second episode in our kind of woo series where we are taking a look at some of the kind of more spiritual side of life. So today we're going to talk about how to connect with yourself through connecting with nature, which has been a big journey for both of us. Now, you will probably have heard some of my path. We go into that a little bit more deeply, and you will also hear what Joe's journey has been like in terms of connecting with nature. So we share our own personal stories, including how we've connected with nature and how you might want to get started deepening your own connection with nature and why you might want to do that. So here's what you'll learn. What our own personal journeys in connecting with nature have looked like, whether the land has a feeling and how to connect with that feeling. We talk about what happens when we're disconnected from nature. We discuss what it means to connect with nature and how to do it. We talk about why we should even bother, benefits of connecting with nature. We discuss whether or not this is for everyone. Should everyone really connect with nature? We discuss whether or not you actually have to spend hours hiking every weekend like I do, or if there are other ways of doing it. We discuss whether or not it matters what sort of nature you hang out in. We ask the question, are some places more magical than others? We share where to go, when to go, what to do, how to get started with connecting with nature, and how to know if you're doing it right. And is there a right or wrong? So I hope you find this episode interesting and useful. I know that a lot of people in my life have kind of through osmosis become more connected to nature through hanging out with me because that's such a big part of my life. So since you're listening to this, I invite you to come with me on this journey of connecting with yourself through connecting with nature, and I hope you find this interesting and useful.
Hi everybody, it's Joe Casey. I'm here with Holly Wharton.
Hello.
We're here with another joint episode, and for those of you who listened to our last episode, you'll know that we're back for another season of doing these monthly joint episodes, but with a slightly different focus, partly triggered by the fact that Holly's life and work is taking a slightly new direction. Partly because I think one of the things that has always been really good fun, both for listeners and for us with Holly and I, is that we're not exactly an odd couple, but we're on different stages and different paths. So I find that I always have 7 million questions for Holly because she is so much more evolved and further down her path towards all things, embracing all things woo. Whereas I feel like I'm open, but I'm much more of a beginner with this stuff. And so today we're going to be talking about something that is close to both of our hearts, and which is the connection between intuition to woo, to spirituality and nature. And this is something that Holly is, I think it's kind of fair to say it's almost like central to your work these days, is it not?
Yes, absolutely. And I've made a lot of recent changes in my business and life and books and writing to be more focused around nature rather than the mindset stuff.
So we're going to be talking about things like how to connect with nature for those of you who are maybe kind of at the beginner stages. I've got, 7 million questions about this. I wonder, Holly, if you would expand on the conversation that we were having on our last monthly podcast. And obviously, if listeners to Holly's regular weekly podcast, you will be much more familiar with this. But would you mind just sharing a bit about what your journey to this point has been and where you're at now?
In terms of my connection to nature?
Yeah.
Or in general?
Well, both. Because I think they're really intertwined.
Yes, they absolutely are. So nature is something that I think has always been important to me in different ways throughout my life. So grew up in a house with a very large garden full of fruit trees and nut trees. And every summer, my family would plant tomato plants and like full vegetable garden. And so I just kind of grew up with that as normal. And my grandmother, who lived with us for a while and then eventually moved out to an apartment, always had a balcony full of flowers. So I came from kind of a fairly botanical family. And when I was 15 years old and I got my first job, it was at a garden center because I loved gardening and I loved plants so much. And so that was kind of my first connection to nature. As a child, I used to, play out in the garden. There was this tree that I always used to climb. And I really liked being outside and being with the plants. And my first job was absolutely delightful. I worked there for 7 summers, I think it was, throughout high school and university. And I just kept coming back because I loved working there. I loved helping people find the right plant for the garden. And at the same time, I started hiking. So I lived right down the street from this state park that had a little mountain on it. It's the Mount Diablo State Park.
I love that. We don't really have that so much in this part of the world. We had a state park that had a little mountain in it. We do in Wales, I guess. If you go,
yes.
If you go kind of more towards Wales, there's like Snowdonia National Park and things like that. But yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
Like there's literally a mountain at the end of like the street. Like you just drove down the street and just hiked up the mountain. So, like, as I say that, I'm aware that how lucky I was to grow up with that. And my poor friends from high school, like, they weren't as into it as I was, but I would drag them up the mountain on weekends and, during the summer. And I loved it. I loved exploring. And now that I've spent so much time this year doing, like, navigation courses and advanced navigation and working with maps and map reading, it's kind of terrifying how I used to just, the age of 16 or 17, just set off and explore new trails on this mountain.
Yeah, the parent in me is kind of going, whoa. Because actually saying, we don't really have mountains around here. We do have lots of areas of natural beauty really not far from us. And where I live, we're right on the edge of Derbyshire, which is the Peak District. And so I used to work with a couple of people who of a weekend would volunteer for the kind of the mountain rescue and were regularly telling me tales of, we were at all weekend rescuing these people who'd gone out, didn't have enough water, the weather came in really fast, they didn't have enough warm weather clothes with them. So the parent in me, the risk averse person, is kind of going, 16-year-old Holly, please don't do that.
And as I'm saying this, I'm also wondering, did my mother even know I was doing those things? Like, I'm not aware of hiding it, but like, I wondered, like, did they know how much time we spent up on the mountain?
Yeah, I guess. Oh my God, there's so many things as a parent to be worried about, but part of me is thinking, well, at least it was good, healthy outdoors living. You weren't like, down at outside the back of the mall taking drugs or something.
Good point. So that was kind of my early kind of part of my journey in terms of connecting to nature. So through hiking and through gardening. And then I was like, I kind of forgot about that for so many years. I went to a university, lived in a really beautiful part of the state. I was in San Luis Obispo, so there was like tons of nature all around me, but I wasn't really taking advantage of it. And then, moved abroad, lived in Spain. Costa Rica was obviously full of gorgeous nature. And so I did kind of touristy nature things. But I didn't do kind of the connecting to nature things until I moved here to the UK. And that was kind of the next big stage in my journey to connecting with nature.
So how did that happen? Because I've always been curious about this, because you grew up in California, and now I've been to California. It is beautiful, but it's very different in terms of climate. It's very different in terms of landscape to the UK. And we are a damp little country, and that I say that with great affection because it means that we're very, very green. That's what I tell myself on the days like today when it's absolutely pouring down. I go, oh God, I've got to take the dog out in that. But it means that we're very green. There's we're quite hilly in places, but we don't have a lot of kind of mountain ranges and things like that. So I'm really curious about whether there was a real kind of affinity when you first came here, or did it take some adjusting? I'm really curious about whether it was something about the UK land that you felt this real connection with straight away.
Absolutely, yes. So from a practical perspective, the area that I grew up in was the East Bay of California. So kind of very rolling hills, the mountain at the end of the street, but lots of like rolling golden hills. And the area that I live in now is the Surrey Hills, which is rolling green hills. So it's very similar landscape, but in a different color. So from a practical perspective, I'm seeing kind of similar landscape, but from a more spiritual perspective, from the second we landed in this country and I started kind of looking around and getting to know things, I felt at home. And I've not felt that anywhere else that I've lived, and I've lived in several different countries. So there were kind of many stops along the way between California and England. But I absolutely feel a deep, deep, deep connection to my land, to my land, to this land.
That's so fascinating. Have you ever done like your genealogy or anything like that?
No, I'm really curious about that. I know I'm English and Welsh on my father's side of the family, so it makes sense. And I do feel like I've had many, many past lives on this land, but I feel such a strong connection here. And when I ever kind of try to imagine, what would it be like to move somewhere else, it just doesn't feel right. Like I would just feel very disconnected.
I find that wild. I love it. I love just little details like that, and the fact that that feeling of being at home. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Okay, carry on.
Yeah, it's something it's kind of difficult to explain from like a logical perspective, because I know I don't know how many people are aware of this kind of feeling, but having moved a lot in my life, I lived in several different places in California, I lived in Spain, I lived in Mexico, a couple different places, Argentina, a few different places, Costa Rica, and I never felt that connection to the land. Like I lived in beautiful places. I love all the places that I lived. I'm very grateful for those opportunities. But it's here that I really feel that connection, that sense of being home, of coming home, of finding my place in the world.
That's really, there's something really powerful about that. And that sense of, I don't know, like that when you said of like finding my place in the world, it almost feels like you're describing everything, something kind of clicking, or like it just
absolutely
an alignment. Everything kind of go and lining up.
Yep. That's exactly what it's like. It's like an energetic alignment with the land. So yes, very happy here.
So, but it's not just a connection with the land, as in, I know lots of people who would say, oh yeah, I really like being outdoors. But for you, it's gone so much deeper. I feel like you are so much more attuned to the stuff that the land gives us.
Yeah, it's definitely an energetic thing for me. It's more than just, I like going out for a walk and I like the scenery that I'm walking through here. It's just this gut feeling that I belong. It's a deep connection to the energy of this land. And it's hard for me to describe because it's probably something that I don't fully understand. But I just feel like this is where I'm meant to be, at least now at this point in my life.
And I think, well, I think that's one of the things in the modern world I know that's one of the things that I struggle with as well. The fact that there's so many things are happening. We're aware of so many things that we can't quite explain properly, and so therefore we dismiss them because we haven't got a way of logically or intellectually describing it.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, certainly for my journey as I've got older, is I'm much more veering over to the kind of Elizabeth Gilbert view on things of I'm very comfortable with uncertainty and not knowing the reasons why, just accepting the reason is.
I like that.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm very open to the fact that this could be magic or it could be my imagination, and it doesn't really matter to me either way which it is.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's a really kind of difficult place to get to for a lot of people, because we always want to know why. We want to understand the reasons behind the background, how does this work? Because that's how we're so used to approaching the world. So I think it's really challenging for a lot of people to come to that place of, I don't understand this, but it feels good. It feels right. I like it. So let's just roll with it.
Yeah, it's so funny because at the same time, we have, so many more people, I suppose, saying that they are open to different belief systems. So many more people even doing things like, believing in angels or UFOs or even like quote unquote conspiracy theories. Yeah. I think that the fact is that as we have this huge part of us as humans that is very open to belief. And, for me, belief is simply things that we don't have necessarily the logical or the scientific evidence for. And yet there's still part of our brain that kind of go, yeah, but I need the evidence. I also find it fascinating how our brain can sometimes go off and find evidence. So have you ever looked at those studies? They've done things like where they've closed off the left or the right hemisphere, or done something so that people with brain injuries, so that the two hemispheres of the brain can't communicate. And they've done these experiments where they it's something to do with if you close the one eye for somebody who has this type of brain injury, so the left and the right hemisphere can't communicate. It's like if you close off the right eye, just like cover it, the left brain can't take in any of that information. And they do things like give them a drink and then uncover the eye, and kind of suddenly this drink has appeared and the person's brain can't compute where it's come from, and it makes up a reason. So they'll say like, well, where did that drink come from? And they'll go, oh, I was thirsty, so I went out and got it. And they clearly hadn't, but it's like the brain has to come up with a logical reason as to why this has happened.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. So I do think that relationship with our logical brain and our intuitive side of ourselves is really, really fascinating. I do think that there are some things that, evidence is really good for, like climate change and things like that, and I love science, but I also acknowledge that there are things that clearly science hasn't got round to being able to explain yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of my favorite definitions of woo, is that woo is just science that we don't understand yet.
Yeah. So would you mind just talking about a little bit, because this has become a real spiritual journey for you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that kind of sparked a massive change in my spiritual path earlier this year when I left a group that I had been in for 12 years. And because I felt like I needed to kind of shift my spiritual focus towards deepening my spiritual connection to nature. And that was when I found the Druid course that I'm on now. And I'm just kind of wrapping up my first year in that. And that's been a massive part of my journey this year. And it's really given me a framework for kind of deepening my connection to nature, adding kind of more layers to it, and just making me even more appreciative of this connection that I feel to nature.
So can I ask about Druidism then? Because I know so little about it, even though some of the only bits that I do know is that it's one of the kind of the longer standing, oldest religions of of England and Wales. Was it also Ireland and Scotland as well? Or?
Yeah, so it was Britain is where it originated, and people would come from Ireland, people would come from, what is now France, Europe, to study this years and years and years ago in pre-Roman times. And of course, it was when the Romans came and brought Christianity that it kind of got squashed out and went into kind of hiding and wasn't openly practiced for many, many years. And it's actually, making a massive kind of comeback now. And it has been for decades. But I think now with the internet, people have so much more access to this type of information and learning it that it makes it a lot easier to kind of spread the message and spread the concepts and spread the ideas. So, yeah.
So, and if at any point you just kind of go, okay, you're just going to have to go away and read a book, but could you give me some of the what are some of the key concepts? I know it has something to do with nature.
Yeah.
What are some of the key ideas and the key concepts?
So I'm still very new to this. I mean, I'm just completing the first year of my 3-year course. So this year is the Bardic grade. So we've been looking at stories, kind of, don't want to say folk tales, but you get the ideas, and ancient stories and the different layers of teaching that those stories come and how they relate to nature and, the different elements, earth, air, fire, water, looking at that and our connection to that and how those elements show up in our lives, the turning of the seasons, that kind of thing. So that's been kind of the primary focus for my studies this year. And going out into nature and doing ritual with these elements and seasons and things.
And so is the gods or the spirits in there?
So, I mean, there's definitely been mention of, goddesses and things, but it hasn't exactly been a study of ancient gods and goddesses so far. I don't know if we're going to get into that or at what point we would get into that. But yeah, it's been more about focusing on the elements and the seasons and our connection to that.
So much of that seems to make such sense because we are... And then, actually, as I think about it, I wonder if one of the reasons why maybe someone like Britain or feels... Or one of the reasons maybe that you feel that deep connection is almost like you can't ignore the seasons here. So it's like in someone like California, and I've been to California, one of the kind of laments that people sometimes say is, we don't really have seasons, I mean, I know that they do, but not in the same way that, it's really clear when autumn is here. It's really clear when spring is here. It's really clear when it's... So they are very kind of... unignorable, the seasons and the turning of the year. It's almost kind of in your face in a way.
It is. And the more time you spend outside, the more you see that. I know when I'm going out on my walks, when the snowdrops are going to be starting to appear, when the daffodils are out, when the hawthorn berries are out. So it's I love it because it's like kind of seeing old friends. Mm-hmm. Because they're going to come back, they show up, they're beautiful, you see them, and it's like deepening that relationship and looking out for them and knowing they're going to show up. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but the more time you spend outside, the more you get to know this stuff.
Yeah, I know that because we've had Lucy, our dog, for 2 years now, and I know that. So if I ever went for a walk, I would tend to go, before we had Lucy, it would tend to just be, the summer, the spring, or the nice kind of sunny winter days. Whereas when you have a dog, you have to go out every day, usually twice a day. And I remember that first year of having her, kind of coming home to the point where, my husband was kind of rolling his eyes, kind of go, oh, really? Yeah. Because I was like, it's just amazing. You walk every day in the very same path and you see the different changes every day. Because I'm really lucky that we have a river and some green space just 5 minutes away. And there's such a comfort and a joy in being able to witness that and see the seasons. Whereas I think in the times when I would stay indoors or go to, maybe I'd go into town shopping or something like that, I wasn't able to notice all of that stuff in anything like the same way. And there was a real joy and comfort in seeing those subtle changes, almost like you're reminded daily of, yes, we are all in constant flux and constant evolution and constant, turning of the seasons, turning of the mood, and it connected me to so many other aspects of my life, just that daily walk. And I'm a bit of a creature of habit in some areas, and I do tend to walk the same route every day. And I think one of the reasons that I really enjoy doing that is because I can see those subtle changes on a daily basis.
Yeah.
It's wild. I love it.
I know. So what's your journey been like? Because I feel like you've done a lot of connecting to nature kind of more and more since I've known you.
Yeah, it's really funny because as you were talking about your first job in a garden centre, I really wanted my first job to be in a garden centre.
Wow.
I know. It wasn't. My first job was on TV, and that was very that was very different and very intense. That's a whole other episode. But so my dad was always still is a really keen gardener, and so every house that we had, my dad was never that fussed about what the house was like, how big it was, or anything like that, so long as it had a garden. And so I can remember even from being really young, being out there, planting peas and doing all that stuff. And then when I was a teenager, in my very early 20s, I kind of rebelled a little bit against that, and I was like, oh god, it's so boring out in nature. And then I remember getting in my early 20s when my first kind of major bout of depression hit, and I was we were also having to move out. I was also going through a divorce. It was a very dramatic time in my life, and so I had to move out of this house that we had. And I'd in this house, even when my marriage was breaking up, I took real solace in the garden. And there was something just really soothing about just going out there and digging and planting things, and the fact that you couldn't rush it. You planted a seed, and nature would take its own schedule to for that seed to sprout, and I found something immensely comforting about that. And so when I had to move out of that house, it was really important that even though it was a flat that I moved into, that it had a garden in just this little patch of earth. And so gardening became a real significant part of my life again, probably right up until two kids. I found with two kids, I just didn't make enough time for it to be. For me, there's something just absolutely delicious and incredibly soothing about being able to go out on your own, just be with the earth and the soil and all of that. And I found with having kids, I'm not very good at sharing the space.
Yeah.
So, it's just a very different experience when you've got kids and they want to help you dig and they want to help you plant things, and you're kind of going, no, don't put that. So it just became very different. I haven't really got back into gardening in anything like the same way, but it was kind of one of my first passions, really. So being disconnected from nature is always really bad for me. I remember I had this idea at one point. This is before I discovered I was pregnant with my son. So this is going back nearly 20 years. I wanted one of these like urban flats in the centre of town. So moved to Manchester, paid a ridiculous amount of money each month for this flat, and almost immediately, like within days, just like there's no green. It's all concrete. There's no green. I'm really having this almost existential feeling of there's no green. And almost like this physical reaction to the fact that I was really missing green space. Yeah. So I think that's always been there. But then this past couple of years, getting Lucy, getting the dog, and having something that forced me to get out every day has been immense. And then there's been something about working with you so much, being able to have these conversations And I have to say, I have another client and friend called Tracy Nichols, who I'd love to kind of get the three of us having a conversation at some point.
Yeah.
Who lives in Philadelphia, does a lot of work, has done a lot of work with like organizational like ecosystems, and very into kind of nature-based therapy, works a lot with folks who are highly sensitive. She's an aromatherapist, she's a body worker, and so she talks along similar lines to you in many ways, but from a different perspective. You have different energies, but you're so similar. Anyway, and I think the fact that over the past kind of 2 years, particularly having these really quite in-depth conversations with both of you, suddenly one day I was out walking and I noticed I was putting my hands on the trees. I had this real urge to put my hands on the trees as I was walking, and I just got this really nice, energetic, almost like connecting in school when you do electrical circuits, and there has to be a connector there to make the electricity flow. It was like me putting the hand on the tree was connecting that circuit. I could almost feel like this flow of energy around me and the tree when I put my hand on the tree. And for many months I kind of was like, okay, well, that's weird.
That's not normal.
That's not normal, no. And then after a while, I just felt like the trees were talking back to me.
So you felt like the trees were talking back to you. So what was actually happening?
This still happens now, and I say to my husband and my daughter, I'm just talking to the trees, and my daughter, who's 9, would just go, "You know they don't talk back, don't you?" And I was like, well, just because you can't hear them doesn't mean they do. But I swear they do. Sometimes it's more like quite a clear voice that I hear.
Yeah.
Other times it's more like a sense of what they're saying. It's a different way of communicating. Now, I have to say, I wrestled with this for quite a few months before I was even going to tell anybody. And if I didn't know you and Tracy, then I probably wouldn't have mentioned it to anyone. And I remember mentioning it to Tracy, because you and I hadn't spoken in a bit of a while. And she went, "Oh, great." Like, it was the most normal thing in the world.
Yeah, I was so excited to hear that from you.
And then when you and I reconnected, I said, "Did you know that I talk to trees right now?" And you fell off your chair laughing because you know what my next book is about. So I don't know. I think it might have been some kind of thing that one or both of you have done. It's almost like this channel has opened up in me. And so, I talk to the trees.
You with the virus.
Yes. And so I have conversations with the trees, and they're always really wise and reassuring. And when I went to Arizona back in May, we went to Sedona, and they're called the vortex trees over there, because it's meant to be these vortexes, energy vortexes that make the trees kind of grow all twisty. And we'd gone hiking one day, and I put my hand on the tree, and I swear the tree said, "Please don't do that. I'm really delicate."
Oh.
I was like, "Oh, of course you are. Of course you are, because these trees are all twisted and their bark it almost looks like it's shredded." And so I just put my hand just above it, and the tree was like, "Oh, thanks, that's much better." Oh, you know,
wow.
Yeah, it was, and that was the clearest that I'd ever heard them. So I'll admit, there's part of me right now feeling a little bit kind of, oh God, people are going to listen to this, but there's also part of me just go, well, it's just that's what's true to me. I take great comfort in the fact that I just find the trees so comforting and benevolent, and they're so wise. And I'll go out on my walk each day, and there's a group of trees not about a 3-minute walk from my house, and I'll go, "Hello, darlings," or "Hello, my beauties," or something, and they're just gorgeous, and they're just lovely. And I don't know any more about them, and it's almost like one of those things where I don't even want to go down the route of questioning it, because it just is, and it just feels really right, and that's my experience. And it's one of those experiences that, despite trying to, I can't talk myself out of, and I don't want to talk myself out of anymore. That's my reality. I go and talk to trees every day.
Excellent.
Yeah. And I also started playing about with like tarot cards. And I say playing about because I did a bit of a course, like an e-course where, you're meant to learn a card each day. And I just found all of that was too, I don't know, intellectualizing it for me. Yeah. And so I just actually prefer to pull cards, and I don't quite know what they're officially supposed to mean, but I take the things from them that I need to. So that's what I mean. I feel like I'm a real novice with this stuff. And what I struggle with, and I think a lot of people struggle with, is it okay for me to just dabble in this stuff? Am I being disrespectful? I know the tarot has a real history to it. Am I being really disrespectful if I just play about with them? There's all of those kinds of feelings with it, and yet something intuitively says this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think the difference here is that you're kind of doing more of an experiential learning rather than like formal learning about it. So you just went out and started talking to trees. You just, as you say, dabble in your tarot cards rather than like taking a formal class in like channeling tree spirits or, learning the tarot.
Hold the phone. You can do a class in channeling tree spirits?
I don't know. I'm sure there's a class on everything. I don't know.
You should totally do one of those, Holly. You should totally do one.
There may be some workshops in the future. We'll see. But I think that's the thing. I think we're so used to placing value on formal education that we don't value as much these kind of experiences of learning by doing. And that's what it's been like for me. I mean, this whole journey with my tree book this year has been learning by doing and connecting with the trees by doing. I don't have, I've never taken a class on how to talk to trees. It's just we do.
So can we talk about the tree book?
Yes, we can talk about the tree book.
So listeners, I swear to God, this is how the conversation with Holly and I went. We hadn't spoken it was 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, it was like 5 months.
Yeah. So I think it was from May up until when we connected a few weeks ago. And so we're recording this now early December. So it was kind of, I think, end of October we connected.
Yeah, I think so.
And we said, so what's been going on with you? And I burst out, I talk to trees now. And you nearly fell off your chair laughing. Because you were like, guess what my latest book's about?
The stories of trees.
The stories of trees. The stories that the trees are telling you.
Yes.
Yeah. See, and that's how I knew. Oh, it was you. It was you who affected me with this thing. Or opened up this gift in me.
Yes.
Yeah, it's probably better. So, the stories of trees. How did that happen? Did one of them just one day say, "Oi, I've got a story to tell you"?
Yeah, actually, exactly. That was it.
Wow.
So I was on this forest bathing meetup at Newlands Corner.
Sorry, what's forest bathing?
Yes. So forest bathing it's this fantastic concept of reducing stress and improving your health through being out in the woods. And I believe this concept originates in Japan, where it's a therapy that they will prescribe to patients in their national health service. And like it's considered a legitimate type of therapy. And it's just going out there and kind of soaking up the chemicals that trees have and the natural kind of energy that the trees have in these forest environments. And so they talked a lot about the science behind it at the beginning of the meetup. And we kind of did different ways of connecting with the forest and the trees and smelling and using all the senses. And one of the last things we did towards the end of the meetup was we were in this grove of ancient yew trees. And they said, pick a yew tree and just, kind of connect with it. And the second we walked into that grove, I saw this one yew and I knew that was the one. And so I kind of went straight over to him and hugged the tree and just started talking. And I was working on this fiction book I was really struggling with because I don't write fiction. it's new, it's hard, and it wasn't going well. And so the tree said, I have a book for you that's going to be a lot easier than the book you're working on. So I suggest that you put that on the back burner and do this instead. And he said, the trees have stories. Like, we have stories to tell, and it's very important for people to hear them. And you need to take these stories and collect them and put them in a book and get them out in the world, because people need to hear this. And from the second I received this idea, I was really, really excited about it. And as I would go on my walks, in the days and months and weeks after that, trees would kind of speak up to me and they'd say, I'm in your book. I'm in your book. And usually I would kind of make a mental note and come back later to collect the story. And that's what I've been doing the entire year, is collecting the stories of trees.
Oh, that's wild. So I'm really curious then. So do you hear them like really clearly as a voice in your head?
Yes.
Or is it,
yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah. So
I'd say that first tree was very articulate. Most of mine just have a few little kind of words of wisdom for me, and yeah, wow.
Well, it's been a real journey for me with my channeling, because this is essentially channeling. And what I started doing was, when I would collect the stories, I would speak. Like, I would allow the tree to kind of speak through me, and I would record it and then get the transcript done for the book. And that's been a huge journey, because I really have second guessed myself, because a lot of the stories have been kind of consistent with things that are going on in my life. So something would happen to me, or something would come into my awareness in my life, and then the next tree story would be kind of about that. So it was like, part of me was going, am I making this up? Is this for real? Is this the story of the tree? Why is this so consistent with my life? And now the awareness that I've come to is, those things were coming into my awareness so that I would have the framework to understand what the tree was going to be, talking to me about.
Whoa.
So,
yeah. I love that. I love that so much. I can't wait to hear what the trees have to tell us.
Well, it's all about connecting with ourselves through connecting with nature, and getting to know ourselves and finding our true north and trusting ourselves through connecting with nature.
So when we're talking about connecting with nature, what does that actually mean? I mean, I know my version of it, and
Yeah.
I would love to know your version of it.
Right. So I think the important thing to say here is that there's no right or wrong way to connect with nature. It's whatever is right for you. So your way is going to be different from my way, which is going to be different from, everyone's way. So for me, for the longest time, it's been walking. Walking is one of the ways I connect with nature. Gardening is a way I connect with nature. Being outdoors. But one of the things that I've learned this year through the stories of trees that I've collected is, it's about being still in nature. And that's been a massive shift for me, because I was so used to just going out and walking. I do the Walk 1,000 Miles challenge every year. So every time I go outdoors, it's about getting the miles in. And the trees have really encouraged me to, that's fine, but also make some time to be still in nature and just observe and feel and experience.
Immediately thinking, yeah, I walk a lot in nature, and sometimes I do it faster or slower.
Yeah.
But, a lot of it is about kind of walking, but I'd never really thought that much about just sitting and being still in nature. I suppose we still have this, or I certainly still have this idea that, most experiences have to be active experiences, which is somebody who practices and teaches mindfulness is ridiculous, even as I say it out loud.
And I think part of it was also feeling safe doing that, because one thing is walking alone in the forest, another thing is sitting with my eyes closed, silently meditating in the forest. That feels a lot more vulnerable. So that took a while for me to kind of get used to as well.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So how do you connect with nature? Like, what does it mean for you to connect with nature?
For me, I do love being by myself, or with the dog, which is pretty much the same as being by myself because she's just so in the moment.
Yeah.
I have started doing a bit of photography in nature as well, and just noticing different things. What I find is that it was just taking my phone out with me it just trains my eye to notice different things and beautiful shapes and the different colours and exploring different parts. And occasionally it does occur to me, although it's really quite isolated around here, is this the smartest thing to be doing, to be walking on your own? I mean, I have the dog with me, but she's no guard dog. But yeah, so for me, I've really just primarily stuck to walking. I know you do, you did your walks like along the South Downs Way and things like that. But that very often would you camp overnight or?
Well, no, when I've done my national trails and the kind of the longer multiple day walks, I would usually stay at a B&B.
Right.
And I didn't start camping until this year. I went on a wild camping course in Wales, and that was fantastic. And then I bought my own camping gear, and I kind of did some kind of hiking and camping at campgrounds to try out my gear. And my next thing for next year is to do more wild camping, do more walking and camping, because I love camping. Like, it feels so good to just be sleeping outdoors. And it's interesting that you bring up these kind of longer walks, because for me, those are such a deep way to connect with nature, because I do them alone. I'm out walking for, 6 or 8 hours a day for 6, 7, 8 days in a row. And that just really kind of takes me away from my normal life, from the normal world, and helps me to deeply connect with myself.
I find it really appealing, the idea of spending longer periods of time out in nature. You mentioned this idea of like is it the forest bath, the nature
forest
bath?
bathing,
forest bathing, and how this is prescribed, almost medically in Japan, and there is, from what I believe, some quite kind of striking research about the actual effects of us physically and emotionally and psychologically. I know that Audible have produced a podcast called The 3-Day Effect, which is about the kind of therapeutic benefits of, even for quite kind of complex trauma and long-standing depression and things, of spending extended periods out in nature, and how that can be really soothing and beneficial to our spirits, I guess, and our psyche. And I'm really intrigued by this idea about the different energy. I know if I've spent a long day on the computer, doing lots and lots of kind of computer work, it's almost like I have a buzzing feeling in my head. I have tired eyes and things like that, and I know it feels very different, almost like my cells are able to breathe properly. And when I'm out walking, I know that I'm out of sorts if I don't get my walk in every day.
Yes. I feel very unsettled if I'm not spending time out in nature on a regular basis.
Do you think it matters what sort of nature that we hang out in?
No, absolutely not, because I think everyone's going to have their own preferred type of nature. So whether it's an urban park or a forest or the beach or a lake or a river or a stream, like, everyone's going to have their preferred kind of scenery and landscape and nature experience. And I think there's no right or wrong. It's whatever you feel drawn to, and trust your gut on that. If all your friends are beach people and you couldn't be bothered because you'd rather go to the lake, fine. Go to the lake or a pond or whatever you feel drawn to. I think it's a very, very individual thing.
So there's no, this is my type A brain. There's no way of getting this right, so I can't go wrong. Okay.
No. It's trusting your gut and doing what's right for you. Some people are going to prefer kind of that kind of comforting canopy of trees overhead that you get in the forest. Some people are going to want, the wide open views of like rolling farmland, like whatever you need to experience in terms of what you see, the landscape, what you feel, and weather also. Some people are going to love walking in the summer, going outside in the summer. Some people are going to hate that because it's too hot. Like whatever is right for you in terms of time of year, seasons, vision, it's very, very individual.
And so do you have to, are some places kind of more magical than others, or is that kind of not even that relevant now that I asked that question?
No, I think it absolutely is. So absolutely, I think there are some places that are more magical than others, either because they have different energy, because they have more, a higher concentration of nature spirits. But there are absolutely places. The first place that comes to mind when you ask that question is a place called Swallowhead Spring, near Avebury, near West Kennet Longbarrow. And it's, people say that it's a place where the elementals hang out, where there's a lot of that kind of energy. But it's the kind of thing where you kind of walk through this field to get there, then you have to climb over a little fence. And it's like you're in this bubble of different energy. And there's the spring that comes out in the winter, and there's a little stream, and you have to kind of cross these stones to get there. And then there's this beautiful tree that people have kind of covered with wishing ribbons, and it just feels very magical. And I recently took a friend there who had never been there and didn't know anything about it. And the second we got there, she said it's like we're in not another dimension, but it's like we're in this bubble of different energy. You couldn't even hear the noise from the street in the same way. It was kind of muffled. It was very, very different. So absolutely, I think there are some places that are more magical than others for reasons that we may or may not understand. But I think even if we don't believe in fairies or those kinds of energy, nature, spirits, I think we can feel when we go to these special places. I think we can feel that some places are more magical or different or special than others.
I think that's definitely true. I always think that there's, even when a friend of mine's buying a house at the moment, she was looking, going to visit all these houses, and then she just found one. She's, what is it about this house? Is nothing special. It just feels right.
Yeah.
And I think we do pick up much more on the kind of energetic imprints of things. And so, like you say, for whatever reasons, maybe it's ley lines, maybe it's there's ancient, I don't know, magic fairy dust there or something. But there's some places just are more connected, potent. I don't know.
Concentrated. Yeah.
But I guess what we're saying though is that you don't have to seek out those quote unquote extra special places, those magical places, to start on this journey of connecting and connecting your opening up to the effects of nature and that kind of connection between them.
Absolutely. Like your local park might be the right place for you. Just go where you're drawn. It's like when I was getting the stories from trees, I kind of felt at one point that I maybe should seek out kind of some of the more famous ancient trees in Britain. And then I thought, no, all the trees have stories. I don't want to go to the special famous trees. I want to go to just whichever trees are speaking to me. And in the same sense, don't feel like you have to go to, a stone circle or this place or that place or well-known places. Go to whatever draws your interest, whether it's famous or not.
And so is that how you recommend we get started? Just kind of, just get out there, experience it.
Just get out there. If you don't feel a connection to a place, if you don't feel drawn to a place, then just go somewhere local, somewhere that's easy, whether it's a park or a little wood or somewhere. Just get out there, start doing it, and then tweak as you go. If you went to the woods and you hated it, then go to some open fields, go to the beach, go to, some other type of nature. But just play around with it and experiment and see what works for you. And maybe nothing works for you. Like maybe you hate nature. Maybe you don't like the elements. Maybe you have resistance to this. That's fine too. Maybe you'll pick it up again in a few years. Maybe not. Like this is also not like obligatory. Like I don't think that like everyone needs to do this. It would be fantastic if more people did it, but it's not like an obligatory part of existing on this earth.
And for those of you who live in cities, I live in a city. You know, I live in the outskirts of Manchester, and one of the things that I do love about certainly UK cities is that there still tends to be in most of them anyway, green space,
yes,
really easily accessible. So I live in, like say, on the suburbs. I live on a really busy main road. I am literally 10 minutes from 3 motorways, and yet I can walk outside for 5 minutes and I'm by the Transpennine Way. The River Mersey is down there, and you know, there's trees, there's old trees, there's nature, there's water, and you would not know that you're in the middle of the city. I spent many years in Liverpool, huge, great big parks there, you know, Sefton Park and Princess Park, and you know, it doesn't have to be, oh, let's drive out to the middle of the countryside and find some ancient well. That you've for many of us, kind of green spaces relatively nearby.
And also I want to say, you don't even have to go outdoors to do this. Maybe you just start cultivating houseplants. Like maybe that's your connection to nature. Maybe you just start buying houseplants and, you know, having one in every room or having one in your primary spaces where you hang out. Like maybe that's how you get started, and maybe that's the only way you connect with nature. That's fine too.
Yeah. Anything else that we need to cover today?
Yeah, one last thing. Also, like, I'm very connected to the trees and to the plants and to the green things, but nature is not just the plant realm. It's also the animal realm. It's also the mineral realm. So maybe your way of connecting with nature is playing with crystals, healing with crystals, or your pets. You know, maybe you're a cat person and that's how you connect with nature. Like, it's not just the plant realm. So there's so many different ways out there, and there's so many different ways to connect with nature that, you know, we haven't even mentioned today. So do what's right for you.
That's such a good point. Because I you know, both of us are animal people, but I think you and I are particularly drawn to that kind of the plant world. And whereas, I know people who would be like, trees, but, you know, have this amazing connection with animals, or you know, can really feel the energy radiating off crystals, whereas I'm a bit like, oh, okay, this one feels nice, but you know, I don't have that same kind of intensity of experience. And so maybe all routes lead to this, you know, the same kind of destination.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, this has been fascinating. I love getting to talk to you about this stuff.
I'm loving these episodes.
Excellent. Yes. So we are still well up for your suggestions on what you would like us to talk about. We're more than happy to get kind of guest experts in if you know, there are areas that people really want us to find out about, but neither of us are that kind of experienced or knowledgeable. Well, let's face it, I'm not that experienced or knowledgeable in most of these areas. So so please let us know. Jo at jocasey.com and
Holly at hollywharton.com.
And you can connect with me on Facebook. Jo Casey B is my the letter B is my Facebook page, and I have the Facebook group, the Coaches and Healers Collective. Holly, you're not doing the whole kind of Facebook group and social media-y thing in anything like the same way anymore, are you?
I'm Instagramming my outdoor stuff a lot. So that's good if you want to kind of see the kinds of places I walk. And then I've moved my community from Facebook over to Patreon. So that's where I'm mostly hanging out these days.
Okay, and we'll include the links to all of that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Holly. This has been ace. It's been really interesting and juicy and chewy, and it was just really good.
Yeah, I love talking about trees.
Thank you so much for listening, and we will speak to you very soon.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought of it. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or find me online and get in touch. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please give me some feedback and leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts. I will be back next week with another solo episode, and that's all for now. Remember to visit hollywharton.com/286 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.